Did you know that parents rank financial literacy as the #1 most difficult life skill to teach? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app for families. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids quickly, set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Kids learn to earn, save, and spend wisely. And parents can rest easy knowing their kids are learning about money with guardrails in place. Try Greenlight risk-free today at greenlight.com/getstarted. That's GREENLIGHT.com/getstarted.
Hello and welcome to Citation Needed, podcast where we choose a subject, read a single article about it in Wikipedia, and pretend we're experts. Because this is the internet, and that's how it works now. I'm Cecil, and I'll be navigating this Nile Delta, but I'm going to need my oarsmen, 4 guys who will row this boat gently down the stream. Keith, Tom, Noah, and Eli.
Hello. Cecil's the Cox. Nice.
If life is but a dream, I would very much like to wake up now, though, Cecil. Very much.
Oh,
Can
man.
I
You and me both
pinch
sound-
me or
you and me both
whatever.
sound-
Alarm clock.
Oh, God. I'd like to know which of us's dream it is, too. Like, I'm worried regardless, but I want to know which direction to be worried in. Right?
Right? Oh.
It's very obviously me. We all know it's me, right? It's 'cause
Patrons, you're the wind in our sails. If you'd like to learn how to join their ranks, be sure to stick around until the end of the show.
Yeah,
and with
it's
that out of the way, tell us, Eli,
'Cause
what
it's me.
person, place, thing, concept, phenomenon, or event are we going to be talking about today?
Oh, shit, Eli's here. There he is.
Yes,
Hey, Eli.
thank you. It's my dream. We'll be talking about Cleopatra.
Okay, all right. Noah, why did you pick this particular topic?
Well, she's been on my list forever, but after you did Julius Caesar last week, how could I not? Right?
Right? It totally fits. So, okay, so who is Cleopatra?
Well, okay, so Cleopatra was, as it turns out, 1 out of every 4 women in Egyptian fucking history, apparently. The story gets really confusing because every damn woman is named Cleopatra, right? Her mother, her great-grandmother, great-aunt, great-great-grandmother. It's wall-to-wall Cleopatras. Apparently, Cleopatra meant glory of her father, so once you got one of those in the family, you have to have one in every generation, I guess. Anyway, the Cleopatra that we're going to focus on, though, is Cleopatra the 7th Theophilopator, or Cleopatra the 7th, the father-loving goddess. So yeah, feminist icon or no, her official title had 2 references to her dad in it.
All right, so where does this story start?
With Alexander the Great, I guess. So he conquered a huge-ass empire, and then he died while he was still really young, so that empire wound up getting divvied up amongst his generals, and one of those generals, a guy named Ptolemy, wound up with Egypt. And he would kick off a dynasty that would last through 12 generations of his family, ending with Cleopatra 7th Theophilopator, herein referred to as just Cleopatra.
Thank God.
Incidentally,
It's about the Cleopatra. We all know
we
which
know
one.
who Cleopatra is. Yeah,
The
exactly.
one.
Yeah,
called
yeah.
Cleopatra, obviously.
The
ant.
She's like Cher in that way. Incidentally, the genealogy here, more of a family vine than a family tree. So she was also super duper inbred.
Wait, you're telling me the family who named their daughter Daddy's Girl of the girl who is Daddy's had some incest in it?
No.
Okay, but beauty standards change over time. Who knows? Maybe webbed fingers were hot back in the day. We don't know.
Clearly, obviously.
Still are, Tom.
Timeless. Tom, look at me. Timeless.
Now, her family had been ruling Egypt for 12 generations, but they did so as Greeks. So, like, even though their family had been in Egypt longer than, any of our families have been in America, probably, they considered themselves Greek, and they went to great lengths to separate themselves from the hoi polloi Egyptians. In fact, in more than 2 centuries of rule, not a single Ptolemaic ruler had even bothered to learn the Egyptian language.
That's awesome.
Right. But Cleopatra would change that. She was actually quite the polyglot. In fact, before she'd even reached adulthood, she could apparently speak Egyptian, Ethiopian, Hebrew, Syriac, Latin, Median, and Parthian. And I believe she adds more languages before she's dead in this story.
Her secret? She had a real owl passive aggressively stare at her if she didn't
Oh, there
practice
you
every
go.
day. Really did the trick. Just tapping its foot.
The previous kings that didn't learn the language just sat on the throne and progressively spoke louder and slower in a foreign language,
Yeah.
hoping people would understand them.
Need mucho fucking wine bottles for me now. All right.
So anyway, Cleopatra was born in 69 BCE.
Hamburguesa.
Nice. To Ptolemy the
Queso.
12th. There's actually a bit of question about who her mother was, but I feel like most of that question arises from Roman propaganda. Her mother was probably Cleopatra the Fifth Tryphena. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but whatever. And that might also, by the way, be the same person as Cleopatra the Sixth
Of course.
Tryphena. Historical records are weird. Anyway, little Cleo has an older sister named Berenice IV, and younger sister named Arsinoe IV, and two younger
No.
brothers, Ptolemy the 13th and Ptolemy the 14th. So just file those names away for quickie obituaries later in the story.
It's all the same name. If by file away you mean forget them already, Noah, I'm way ahead of you.
Okay, just don't be surprised later when I start killing off siblings. That's all I'm saying. Now, of course, long before Cleopatra came along, the Ptolemaic dynasty had fallen on hard times. They'd managed to maintain control of Egypt, but they'd done so only with Roman assistance. Enough so that by the time she was born, Ptolemaic Egypt was a client state of Rome, and in Rome, there was talk of going one step further and just straight up annexing the wealthy kingdom. In response to threats of annexation, Cleopatra's dad lavished gifts on all the most powerful Romans to the point where he essentially bankrupted his kingdom. Then Rome annexed Cyprus, which was controlled by Ptolemy XII's brother, Ptolemy of Cyprus. That Ptolemy chose suicide over exile, and the other Ptolemy didn't say shit about it. Needless to say, his policy of ceding traditional Ptolemaic lands to Romans and then paying them not to take more, not super popular among the Egyptian people. So in 58 BCE, they exiled him.
Yeah, and he was like, cool, yeah, I actually wanted a couple weeks off. This is great. I'll check back in after Rome kills all of you.
Yeah.
Because I was paying them not to. Do you get that?
Spoilers,
don't.
Heath. No. So we don't know for sure, but it's widely believed that Ptolemy XII took Cleopatra with him when he was exiled. His eldest daughter, Berenice IV, took over as ruler, but that wouldn't last long. A lot of very powerful Romans were losing a lot of money with Ptolemy off the throne. So in 55 BCE, the Roman governor of Syria invaded Egypt and restored Ptolemy to power. Now, one of the Roman soldiers who really distinguished himself in that campaign was a young hottie by the name of Mark Antony. Cleopatra, who would have been 14 at the time, accompanied the Roman army along with her dad and would later confess that she fell in love with Mark Antony during that trip. Big old pin in that.
Yeah. Hey, Noah, before we stick pins in things, quick note that Mark Anthony was 26 when the 14-year-old fell in love with him. So now I'm picturing him marching through the streets of Egypt in a Monster Energy hat and with like a wrap on his chariot. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's rolling coal, like literally taking coal from one place to another.
Yeah,
That's
right. Or still a dinosaur. He's rolling dinosaur at that.
Mostly the high school parties. Yeah.
So
Fuck you, Greta Thunberg. Shoot, that'll make sense eventually.
So Ptolemy XII was back on the throne. He had his usurper daughter exiled along with all her wealthy supporters. A bunch of them were executed as well. He seized their property, used that to pay off the expenses that he incurred convincing Romans to restore his rule. And in all of this, Cleopatra learned some really important lessons about courting Roman power and murdering your siblings when you have the chance. Those would come in very handy later in her life. But not that much later, because in early 51 BCE, a mere 4 years after returning to the throne, Ptolemy XII would die. Now, just to keep things good and fratricidal, Ptolemy appointed both Cleopatra and her younger brother Ptolemy XIII as co-rulers.
Shouldn't she just be Cleopatra if he's Ptolemy? Are we skipping P's? We're just skipping P's.
So, and keep in mind that she's 18 years old at this point, and while there's no official record of it that I'm aware of, it's safe to assume that she then married said little brother to consolidate their rule.
Hey, scribe, roll it up. We are not doing documents for this one. For this marriage, we're not writing shit down.
So actually, sibling marriage had been the norm in Ptolemaic Egypt going all the way back to Ptolemy II. And there's no reason to think that it would have stopped with her. And I should note, by the way, that, much of the ancient world thought that practice was every bit as gross as we think it is now, including the Greeks of the time.
I've always said Heath is the ancient Egypt of our podcast.
Okay, the step is different, and that's it's a thing. Whatever. The Lannisters are a handsome couple. Read a book.
When they inevitably smashed their celebrity names together, did the couple go by Cleopatra or Cleolemy? Which one was it, do you think?
All right, Cleolemy is amazing. So, within months of Dad's death, official documents were listing Cleopatra as the sole ruler. No doubt she'd effectively sidelined her little brother early on, but he still had powerful allies that were way less willing to roll over and let her have the throne. Pretty soon that turns into a civil war, though it manages to stay on kind of a low broil for a while.
Yeah, so says you, but until there's a Ken Burns documentary slow panning over like scrolls of love letters from the front, there's only one civil war for my heart.
Okay, yeah, right. No, they're hieroglyphs. Yeah. And of course, it's around here that this story intersects with Cecil's essay from last week. In the summer of 49 BCE, Pompey the Great's son, Pompey the Pretty Good, showed up in Alexandria asking for Egyptian help fighting off Caesar's bid to overthrow the Roman Republic. In what might well have been their last joint decree, both Cleopatra and Ptolemy XIII agreed to throw in with Pompey and send 60 ships and 500 soldiers to aid in their war efforts.
Pompey's second kid always resented being called Pompey the okayish. He really hated it. Just hated it.
Cecil, you'd think so, but from experience, I'll tell you, it's a lot less pressure. A lot.
Yeah, no, as a second son, I got to agree.
Easy peasy.
Yeah.
Pompey the podcaster.
All right, no, that hit a little close to home, Eli. I'd like you to take that one back. So shortly after that, Cleopatra's brother gets the upper hand in the conflict. She has to flee Alexandria, which is the capital of Egypt at the time. And while that probably seemed like quite a victory to him at that time, it also forced her to go elsewhere, which is where all the allies were. So she goes to Syria. She raises an army. Her army marches on Alexandria. They get bogged down along the way.
Ooh, pull the army over. I just saw the cutest little vintage store. I have to stop. I have to.
All right.
They're not going to have your size. They never have your size.
So
I'd like to distance myself from Heath's yes and to my.
You're going to be mad later. I'd like to distance myself from your thing.
I'd like to distance myself from both things. In the meantime,
I've got terrible news about the company you're returning to.
So, in the meantime, Caesar's war spilled into Greece, where Pompey's forces get their asses kicked in the Battle of Pharsalus. Naturally, Pompey decides to flee to Egypt, right? He's had this long, close relationship with the Ptolemies. They just recently contributed a massive force to aid him in the war. It's the only place left where he feels like he can really re-raise an army. So he hauls ass there while Caesar's mopping up his forces left in Europe. But Ptolemy's advisors are starting to rethink their allegiance, right? Rome is looking for an excuse to annex Egypt already, and they figured harboring one half of a civil war was a great way to bring that about. So when Pompey shows up, they stab him, they chop off his head, and they present it to Caesar when he shows up a few weeks later.
He picks it up. He picks up Crassus's head on the way down, and they had a wicked puppet show. Just amazing.
That one's filled with gold.
All right, got to do a new voice. No, stupid. Christ, no.
So Caesar's super distraught over the killing of Pompey. No, for realsies, look how distraught he is. So he sets up shop in Egypt for a while to remind them who's client here. And this is, of course, where we get the famous meeting between Caesar and Cleopatra. There are three versions of the story here. In Cassius Dio's version, she hears that Caesar likes to have affairs with royal women, so she gets all gussied up. Without informing her brother, she shows up at the palace to seduce Caesar. In Plutarch's version, she's actually smuggled in to the palace where he's staying inside a bed sack. And in Hollywood's version, she arrives rolled up in a carpet. But however it actually happened, the two met, and it sparked off an affair so famous that we're still talking about it 2,000 years later.
Well, while Caesar yawns through the most boring "nothing inside this carpet" trick of all time, we're going to take a quick break. Caesar, a gift has arrived from you from the beautiful Queen of Egypt.
Send it in.
A beautiful hand-woven carpet.
Yes, excellent. Put it in the treasury, please. But I'm sorry. Is there someone inside there?
I don't know if it is there.
I didn't get that. What?
Yeah, me neither. I didn't get it either.
I said, open it and see.
Do we cut it open? What do we? It's got
What? No, unroll it. Unroll it.
Here? Like unroll it?
On the floor. Idiot.
Oh, right. Sorry. Jeez.
I'm sorry, but who are you?
I am cool. Oh, sorry. That carpet thing made me really dizzy.
Are you gonna throw up?
Nope. Don't say it, but I'm not. I'm just. Oh. Give me a second.
Take the time.
Okay. I'm good. No, I'm not. Yep.
Wow, you're so sweaty. You're like glistening.
I was gonna say
like
same.
glistening.
Because I was rolled up in a carpet in Egypt, man. I was in there for like an hour.
I mean, you could have told us that you had like a prepared bit and we would have just
No,
had.
that would have ruined the point is, I would like to sexily welcome you to my country. Caesar.
Got it. Okay. Well, thank you. Thanks.
You're welcome. So, if you'll excuse me, Your Highness.
You're going to go throw up now?
Yeah, in like 4 seconds.
All right, this way. Come on over here.
You think I seduced him?
Probably not, no.
Fucking shitballs.
Before we took a break, Cleopatra was smuggled into Caesar's room for some alone time. Noah, did the rolled up carpet match the drapes?
So it seems like when they're talking
Hold
about
on, Norris. There wasn't
Cleopatra-
enough response to that. Let me do that one more time. It felt like a really good joke just went under the radar, so I might just want to say it one more time.
We would draw a circle around it.
Yeah, I don't know. Just like a really good joke. Just no,
Tell
forget
the-
it. Just go ahead. Just forget
I think
it.
the
Forget it.
editing power might have gone to Cecil's head a little bit.
Wow. Brutal.
I didn't hear
Fucking
it.
rough room. Go ahead,
didn't hear
Noah. Super rough room. Anyway.
So it seems like when they're talking about Cleopatra, no matter how serious a historian you're dealing with, the question of how hot she was invariably comes up. We're going to sidestep that question entirely because it's been answered way more times than it needs to be. But
Okay, she's 12 generations inbred, right? So, like, not.
all right,
Like,
maybe
she
we're
gets
not
rolled out
going to
of that carpet.
sidestep that question.
And it's like, wow, lot of fingers, lot of web.
I can't even tell where your nose starts or begins. It's like a fucking Picasso. It's amazing.
So-
I hope you like chromosomes.
All right.
Because I've got
All right. So what I want to point out, though, is at the time of their meeting, Cleopatra would have been about 22 years old, I think, 21, and Julius Caesar would have been about 53.
Yuck.
And as much as history loves to portray her beguiling Caesar with her irresistible charms, one member of the relationship was notorious for seducing everyone they possibly could seduce, and it wasn't Cleopatra.
Yeah, it's history's version of your buddy who tells you the story of how he met his third wife. You're like, oh, really? You both like skiing? You had a driver's license when she was born, my guy. You don't have a story.
Okay, and today I learned about Leonardo DiCaprio's family line, so that's fascinating.
Yes. Yeah, he's very inbred. A lot of people don't know that. But
You could look at him. You could look at
well,
him.
yeah, right. No, a lot of fingers there. But
Their couple name could be Cleonardo. That's
Right.
That's a good one.
Perfect.
Cleopatra doesn't work as well.
all right, so but that's
Yeah.
pretty. That, no,
They're all
that
pretty
they both
good.
work. So regardless of who seduced who, the two of them hook up. When Ptolemy the 13th figured that out, he was livid. He tries to instigate a riot over it. So Caesar has him arrested. And then at first, Caesar tries to placate everybody, right? He tries to enforce the joint rule edict from Ptolemy XII's will, and even tries to assuage the anger over annexing Cyprus by offering to let the remaining siblings govern there. But Ptolemy's side, they figured they've already got control of Alexandria. Why give half of that up? What's more, they figured they got 20,000 troops. Caesar's only got about 4,000 with him. And what's more, he's got a lot of enemies in Rome that might love to see the whole civil war problem just work itself out on Egyptian soil. So Ptolemy's forces lay siege to the palace where Caesar and Cleopatra are holed up. And that lasts for a few months. And Caesar's like, oh, no, please don't trap me in here for several months with nobody keep me company except for your super hot, half my age sister. And then his reinforcements show
fingers.
up. Yeah, there's an advantage to 8 fingers. Yeah. But Ptolemy's forces flee. Caesar attacks him while they're on the run. He defeats them. And then while Ptolemy is trying to get away, his boat capsizes and he dies. Cleopatra comes away from the whole ordeal pregnant with Julius Jr.
So you could say semen were spilling everywhere that summer.
I could say that. Yeah.
I think he's saying semen landed his heir. I think that's what he's saying.
Sure. Yeah.
Now, despite
seeds or salad.
no, that's good. That's good. Solid.
That's good.
Solid.
Really
now,
good.
despite all the shit they'd just been through with Ptolemy XIII, the overwhelming misogyny of the Roman system prevented Caesar from just naming Cleopatra the sole ruler of the kingdom like he should have. So through his power as Roman dictator, he declared that Cleopatra would co-rule with her youngest brother, the 12-year-old Ptolemy XIV, which is a lot like being invited to accompany 2 named characters on a dangerous mission in Star Trek. So you just don't get attached to this kid.
Yeah, don't worry about that, Noah. There's like 19 guys named Ptolemy in the story, and I think that was the 14th.
He's the 14th.
You said Ptolemy.
Yeah,
it doesn't even make sense. We already forgot who's who is what I'm saying.
Right. Yeah.
We're not attached.
Yeah, for real. Roman history is like a who's who of who the fuck is actually who. That's the
Yes. Right. Now, of course, it's at this point that Caesar and Cleopatra famously cruise the Nile together for a few months and leave everybody else wondering what the newly installed Roman dictator is thinking. Or not. Turns out this might not actually happened. According to the wiki, that might be, quote, a romantic tale reflecting later well-to-do Roman proclivities and not a real historical event, end quote. So anyway, in April of 47 BCE, Caesar leaves, probably to avoid being seen with Cleopatra and her brand new kid. He leaves behind 3 legions to help protect her tenuous grip on power, and like all troops garrisoned in a client kingdom, they're also there to make sure that she doesn't get out of line. 2 months after he left, she gives birth to their bouncing baby boy, and just in case there might ever be any historical doubt about the parentage, she names the kid Caesarion. Now, Caesar himself would never publicly admit to being the kid's dad, but Cleopatra rarely missed an opportunity to tell the world where that sperm came from for that one.
Yeah, I get it. She was like, hey, scribe guy, I need a very graphic flip book with all the fucking spermal dynamics, just a diagram of everything that happens on conception night.
Yeah, well, and her confidant very classily kept her blue dress, so no getting around it there.
Right, yes.
Maury's first episode was that.
So she spent a little time tamping down rebellion and establishing herself as a beloved ruler. Not super hard to do when you're like the first person to rule a country in 13 generations that actually bothered to speak its language, right? And then she decided to take an extended trip to Rome. While she was there, her and Caesar rekindled their affair until he got stabbed to death, obviously.
Citation needed. What I'm saying is here on Citation Needed, that is not obvious.
Right, no, it's not obvious. It's not so obvious that I didn't feel the need to mention it. Correct, yeah. So she stuck around a few months after the assassination in the hopes that maybe Caesar was going to name their son as his heir, but that would not be the case. His will was read shortly thereafter, and of course his grandnephew Octavian was named as his primary heir. Around the time that Octavian showed up to claim his inheritance, Cleopatra wisely got the fuck out of town.
She was going to do the carpet thing again, but her orthopedic shoes kept sticking out of one end, so you
right,
understand
yeah,
that
it's
kind
a
of thing to
one-time
me.
type thing. So fast forward a couple
So
of
many
months.
Eli plots were foiled when his orthopedic shoes were sticking out
100%.
of a carpet when he was doing a
Real
carpet
talk.
thing.
Yeah, right.
Velcro.
Right, yeah. Fast forward a couple of months. Cleopatra poisons her little brother / co-ruler and elevates her infant son to the position. Meanwhile, a tenuous truce is growing in Rome between Octavian, Mark Antony, and Marcus Aemilius Lepidus that history would call the Second Triumvirate. And while it never reached the lofty heights of the first one, it would end about the same. But before it did, the three were united with the ostensible goal of bringing Caesar's assassins to justice, and the ensuing war would once again draw Egypt in, with both the assassins and the Second Triumvirate appealing to Cleopatra for aid. And she answered the call on the side of the triumvirs. In fact, she actually personally led her fleet into Greece to help Octavian and Antony, though she arrived too late to get in on any of the action.
Second triumvirates just sitting around a table as they're going through their rules and they form. Okay, guys, in section 3 here, it's going to list how we want our heads handled after we die. Very important.
Okay, I want a cool voice for the puppet show. I feel like they're going to do that. Scribe, write that down.
Think about it beforehand. Don't just wing it. So eventually...
Hey, are you the guy that made the flip book with the comic? You're really good. That was really good. I appreciate it.
So eventually the triumvirate starts to break down. Octavian is basically in control of the Western Empire. Antony is in control of the Eastern Empire. And Lepidus can fuck right off. He's got nothing. He sucks. And Antony starts to think that maybe his best shot at consolidating his rule is Cleopatra's support. So he starts sending her, "Do you like me? Check this box" notes. And though she resists him at first, she eventually agrees to go on one date with him if he'll have her exiled sister executed. So he does that. So the two of them hook up, and Cleopatra quickly uses their relationship to her advantage and gets Rome to cede Cyprus and Cilicia back to Egyptian control. That makes Antony a darling of the Egyptian people, right? Along with the fact that when he came to Alexandria to bone their queen, unlike Caesar, he didn't feel the need to bring an occupying army with him. Meanwhile, he's just soaking up the royal lifestyle and realizing that being a king is way better than being 1/3 of a dictator.
That's what Eli's going to tell Noah and Heath when he starts his My Little Pony podcast solo.
My solo projects do so well, Cecil.
Right. So by the end of 40 BCE, Cleopatra gives birth to twins, a boy and a girl, who Mark Antony freely admitted to fathering. But by then, Antony was away doing Roman shit. And I should point out that, like Caesar, Antony was married to a Roman lady through all of his Cleopatra fucking. So while he was away playing Pharaoh, she, his wife, was back in Rome provoking a war with Octavian in the hopes of making her husband the undisputed leader of Rome. Well, all she really managed to do was get herself killed, which singled Antony up enough to marry Octavian's sister, Octavia the Younger. Yeah, they only had so many names there. And thereby reconcile their differences for a bit longer. Needless to say, Cleopatra soured a bit on Antony when he doubled down on marrying women that weren't her, but it didn't sour their relationship so much that he didn't father another one of her kids later. And he also continued to expand her kingdom. But that very act was weakening him back home, and Octavian was taking full advantage. He pushed the narrative that Antony was under the spell of some foreign seductress that was talking him into giving away Roman territory, which was, regardless of Antony's grandiose plans for a future joint empire or whatever, more or less true. So Antony's reputation wasn't improved by the fact that soon after all of this, he got his ass absolutely handed to him in Parthia. Octavian cranked up the propaganda war against him, and Antony made it easy by participating in all these rituals that Cleopatra was doing, these very public rituals where she was declaring herself a living god and shit. He even apparently married her, despite still being married to Octavia, and in keeping with the misogyny of the day, the natural narrative was that Cleopatra had brainwashed him with witchcraft and was set on taking over all of Rome.
Yeah, and then they started a podcast about relationships without even telling you about it. It was pretty...
Okay. All right. Eli, I
Treachery.
sent you the requisite formal notice of adjacent podcasting project startup. It was a standard Form 11B36F. You need to do a better job with your record keeping. I'm sorry.
But did you put the proper cover sheet on
Where's
it?
It
the
was in
notary
triplicate.
ism?
You show me the form. You lost it.
So-
You lost it again.
So by 323 BCE,
Bra size in here?
What numbers pop into your head?
Mine.
So by 323 BCE, Octavian was using official speeches to accuse Antony of subverting Roman freedoms as a slave to his Oriental queen. Antony, for his part, was claiming that Cleopatra's oldest son was Caesar's true heir. There was nowhere for this shit to go but war, and when it did, Octavian convinced the Roman Senate to declare war not on Antony, but on Cleopatra.
Oh, man, babe. Looks like bad news. Like, just for you. Just yours.
All right, so now, Cleo's side had the bigger navy, and it's hard to figure out exactly what happens from here because the truth is just drowning in propaganda at this point. But there are a lot of claims that Cleopatra started overriding Antony's military decisions and forcing him to make dumb moves. This stuff probably isn't true. Every indication is that she was super duper smart, and we know that pretty much all of our sources had a vested interest in blaming the foreign queen for everything that went wrong. Suffice to say, when the two fleets met in September of 31 BCE for the Battle of Actium, the smaller force devastated the larger, and Antony and Cleopatra got the fuck out of there. They make it back to Egypt. They spend some time licking their wounds. So Antony went off on a fruitless search for allies, and Cleopatra entered into reluctant negotiations with Octavian, but the negotiations ultimately came to nothing, and in the spring of 30 BCE, Octavian invaded Egypt. Antony fought them for a bit, but soon after the invasion, his fleet and his cavalry surrendered to Octavian. After hearing that Cleopatra had taken her own life in despair, Antony stabbed himself to death. She hadn't taken her own life in despair, but a few days later, she would do so when it became clear that Octavian planned to have her paraded through Rome in a triumph, like a victory prize. But despite all the legends, she did not kill herself with an asp. She was just run-of-the-mill poison. Though I guess, according to the wiki, some historians believe that she delivered that poison with a needle, which would have provided the puncture wounds that would have given like an explanation to the snake story. Now, to be honest, to me, the most interesting aspect to Cleopatra isn't so much her history as her historiography, right? That is how the teaching of her history has changed over time. Because, of course, for centuries, she was just the epitome of the foul, evil, oriental seductress. It was like all the dark aspects of femininity rolled into one. And then she was sort of rescued, but turned into this victim of happenstance that's just tossed around by historical trends and forces beyond her control. The thing
Why
is,
do you need to be rescued from seductress that epitomize the dark aspects? That's awesome. That's great.
That's the thing. There are settings between evil succubus and damsel in distress, and she clearly falls into one of those. And as we sift through the mountains of propaganda meant to denigrate her character and destroy her historical reputation, all we can really say for certain is that she was brilliant, formidable, and fascinating.
And if you had to summarize what you learned in one sentence, what would it be?
I just did. She was brilliant, formidable, and fascinating.
Bravo. Excellent conclusion. Are you ready for the quiz?
I am.
All right.
All right, Noah. With a history as salacious as Cleopatra, a porn parody is inevitable. What should it be called?
A, when that happens? Yeah, okay. Yeah.
A, on your Mark Anthony. B, taking it up the asp.
Well done.
Or C, Carpet Buncher 7.
All right, these are all very good. Actually, Eli, very good. Well done. I'm going to go with taking it up the ass.
Yeah,
that's the one I'd watch.
Correct.
Caliente.
All right, Noah.
Ptolemy Banana. I don't know. Daylight come spelled the other.
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing.
All right, Noah, I am not going to lie to you. These Roman histories are always a bit of a challenge for me to keep track of. Why is that? A, because when dividing up the spoils of war, they still only divide the names 4 ways. Everyone has the same name.
Jesus fucking Christ. You don't need a B, C, or D. It's A. It's A.
Well done. All right, Noah. Which of the following is my favorite weirdly aggressive history argument that I learned about when I looked up Cleopatra? A, when she was living with Mark Antony in Egypt, they started a drinking club. Some historians say it was because Antony thought he was the incarnation of the wine god Dionysus. Other historians say, fuck you, it was a regular dinner club with drunken orgies. There wasn't a god part. B, the drinking club was called the Inimitable Livers. Some people think it was a clever double entendre about living people livers and the organ livers that helps process alcohol. Other people pointed out it wouldn't work as a double entendre in Greek, you fucking idiot.
Right. Well,
stupid. C, some sources mentioned that when the drinking orgy was done, Cleopatra and Antony would dress up as common people and walk around Alexandria doing pranks. Other sources mentioned, hey, did you read that on grunge.com, Heath? It might be made up. Although I love it. I love that they were maybe doing pranks, but probably not. D, according to Pliny the Elder in his book, Natural History, Cleopatra made a bet with Mark Antony
yes,
that she could spend 10 million sesterces, which is about 10 or $20 million in today's money, on a single meal. She ordered, allegedly, a cup of vinegar, and then she took a giant pearl from one of her earrings, and allegedly this was the biggest pearl in the history of the world, according to Pliny, and she dropped the pearl into the vinegar. After it dissolved, she drank the vinegar and won the bet. According to everyone else, Pliny the Elder is a liar a good deal of the time. Also, that wouldn't work. It doesn't even make sense. But then a chemistry professor in New Jersey was like, fuck you, I stand Cleopatra and Pliny, I'm going to prove this. And the professor did an experiment on this, proved that you actually can dissolve a 5-gram pearl in the vinegar that Cleopatra would have had at that time. But that would take like 36 hours to dissolve. So everybody was like, that was dumb. Your experiment was dumb. You wasted a pearl. This is dumb. But then the professor showed that if you crushed up the pearl, like if you had a big knife and you smushed the pearl, and then you had the vinegar be boiling when it comes out
Sure.
from the restaurant, you could dissolve the pearl in about 10 minutes. And everybody was like, oh, so she chugged a pint of boiling vinegar to win the bet? And the professor was like, she probably waited until it cooled. I don't know. Shut up. I wasted 2 pearls on this. Or was it E, all of the above? I enjoyed all of those.
All of the above, and I enjoyed them
that.
too, Heath.
Do you guys think indeed correct?
When your boiling vinegar comes out, the moms at the other tables are like, ooh, I might order one of those. That looks fun.
Yes.
Oh, the sizzling pearl vinegar.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what. I was actually really disappointed that I couldn't get the pearl story into the essay in some other way. So I want Heath to do an essay next week as a thank you for that.
All
Two
right.
pearls, 1 cup.
All right.
Porn title, by the way. Come back.
Well, for Noah, Heath, Tom, and Eli, I'm Cecil. Thank you for hanging out with us today. We'll be back next week. By then, Heath will be an expert on something else. Between now and then, listen to Tom's new show, Talking Ship, a relationship podcast, not a sailing podcast. I know people are confused.
Oh. Are you not doing any sailing stuff?
I'm not saying we're
I mean, you
not
can do both,
doing
right?
There may be knots involved.
Do a little bit of sailing stuff. You live by a lake.
What if you fuck on a boat? Then you're
Right.
gonna right?
If you'd like to help keep this show going, you can make a per episode donation at patreon.com/citationpod, or you can leave us a 5-star review every week. You can get in touch with us, check out past episodes, connect with us on social media, or check the show notes. Be sure to check out citationpod.com.
And then we'll move troops here and here.
And you have to stop at Sephora.
No, you don't have to roll yourself up every time you need something.
I know.
Do you? Do you know?
Yeah.